All right, board members, I see 1, 2, 3, and me makes 4, and we need Supervisor Simidian. And Nancy, when Supervisor Simidian appears, if you'll please take a roll call vote to reestablish the existence of a quorum.
Okay, we'll do that.
Thank you very much. Paul Lorenz, I see that you're there. You'll be reporting on item 20 in just a moment. I'll give Supervisor Simidian
Supervisor Simidian may be having some technical difficulties because I do not see him in the room.
Okay, let's resume our meeting. And we will start with item number 20, which is a report back on the nursing recruitment, retention, and safety at our Santa Clara Valley Medical Center.
Thank you, President Wasserman, members of the board. Let me catch my breath if you don't mind.
Oh yeah, no, it's an exciting thing to come back to the board meeting. I totally understand that.
Well, you know, one of the things that I will share with the board is that I just had the opportunity to give—
Supervisor, apologies. I think we still need to take a roll call to—
Yes, please do. Supervisor Simidian is here.
Yes.
Go right ahead, Nancy.
Supervisor Lee?
Present.
Supervisor Chavez? Here. Supervisor Simidian?
Here.
Vice President Ellenberg?
I'm here. I want to make sure Paul gets back to his story of whatever he's excited about. So didn't want to lose that.
You will. If you know Paul, it's coming. And Supervisor Wasserman is here too. Thank you, Nancy.
And President Wasserman.
Thank you. Go ahead, Paul.
Well, I just had the opportunity to come down from the hospital floor, from the OB department. We started a program called the Daisy Award, which acknowledges nurses that do extraordinary things for our patients. And, you know, I'll give more information on the Daisy Award later, but I think this is one of the things that I want to point out, that the most we can do in terms of supporting our nurses is actually to acknowledge the incredible work they do and show that they bring immense value to the system. So I could not miss the opportunity to be up there along with the other nurse leaders to acknowledge these nurses. And so, of course, I'm out of breath, out of shape, running back to the board meeting here. But, you know, I just can't, you know, say enough about the importance of this topic. We all know that our nurses get supported in a number of different ways. Two areas which we as a healthcare system are heavily focused on is the ability to recruit and retain our nurses. And the other area that I think we all appreciate is that they are under immense pressure. And then when you throw on top of that some of the difficulties and challenges they have in dealing with patients that have behavioral issues, both from a psychiatric standpoint, but also from a clinical standpoint, and they continue day in and day out, provide compassionate and caring support for our patients. And that's not an easy thing to do. So the best we can do is not only acknowledge them, but also to focus on those areas where we can make their lives a little bit more easier in terms of the day-to-day care. Clearly, recruitment and retention is a big area. You know, throughout the pandemic, I think we all appreciate the entire healthcare industry has come under a lot of stress. And that stress translates directly into our workforce. Our nurses, as I mentioned, work very hard, and to the extent that we can support them, express how valuable they are to a system, the greater likelihood that we can retain them from all levels of leadership, including the board. And I think they feel it and they know that. So to bring attention to this item is important. I can also share with you, if you look at our numbers from an industry standpoint, we're faring pretty well in terms of retention. We can do a lot better in terms of recruitment. We know that, acknowledge that. And I think we have taken steps to do that along with the Employment Service Agency. So we acknowledge that there are areas and room for improvement. The other thing is that given the COVID situation, we know that many of our patients present with behavioral issues. The risk is greater. But if you look at our numbers, we've been able to maintain, a steady number of incidents. The problem is that any one incident is too many. And so our ability to work together with labor, with our labor partners, with our nurses to develop programs and initiatives is really where the focus should be and has been. So with that being said, I know John Mills is on the line with me.
Yep.
Jill Sproul would join in a second, but
there.
we're here and available to answer any questions regarding our report.
Thank you. Jill and John, both good to see you. Why don't we go with public speakers first, and then we'll go to Vice President Ellenberg, and we'll go from there. Nancy.
Our next speaker is RNPA. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute and you will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking. RNPA, you are unmuted. You can begin.
Please go ahead and speak.
That is our only speaker.
Good afternoon, Board of Supervisors. This is Alan Kamara. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
We are at a disadvantage here when we're given 1 minute to address such a huge topic that our nurses work so hard for. But all we can say is, just looking at this report, the question that we want to ask the Board of Supervisors is, if all this report that you're looking at right now are all true, why are the nurses complaining? So that takes me to so much of the report that I cannot address in 1 minute, unfortunately. But what we're saying is the nursing union and the nurses identify two major problems for them. All we ask the Board of Supervisors, help us resolve these issues. Violence at the workplace has risen up tremendously. These data are not accurate. Our nurses are so understaffed. They are so understaffed, they don't even have time to report. And I'm seeing here where it says crisis, post-crisis report. We don't even have the opportunity when we have incidents to have a report or to talk about it. That has never happened. So.
Thank you. Next speaker.
That concludes our public comment.
Okay, that one just went away. Thank you. Vice President Ellenberg, you were first, and Supervisor Chavez.
Thanks. I do appreciate that. Hearing from RNPA and from the administration's report, I have just a few questions and then some requests to make. I do understand that there's a likelihood that assaults on nurses in particular are underreported for myriad reasons. I've been told that it's common knowledge to anticipate being assaulted by an aggravated patient, that's just part of a nurse's job, and that contributes to underreporting, as well as a sense of discouragement regarding the likelihood of any follow-up to the reporting. And I'd really like to see I'll say we, but I really mean the hospital administration in partnership with the nurses, create a safe and encouraging place for staff to report assaults, as it's really critical for us to have that data. With respect to gathering accurate data of instances of workplace violence, I'm not sure whether to direct this to Paul or Jill or someone else. Do you have a sense of how often assaults may be happening that aren't reported, and what are specific steps that are being taken to encourage reporting?
Thank you. Paul?
All right, and Jill can add on to this, but I think, let me start out by expressing to the board in response to this question that I think industry-wide, there are challenges with hospitals working with their staff in reporting. So even if you look at our statistics, and I would also agree that there are situations that aren't reported that should be reported. And I think the same would be true for other healthcare facilities. And we know that in speaking to our association and our counterparts. So industry-wide, and specifically our Valley, we want to encourage reporting of all levels and types of incidents. If you look at the numbers, typically you would see if we've been successful in encouraging staff to report, you start to see a trend of numbers and the volume going up. And that can be attributed to two things. One is that there's now staff that are reporting, and number two, that it continues to be a challenge for the system to address. So what we try to do is through the leadership and through communication with staff, reinforce the importance of this, and not only for their safety so that we can help manage the situation going forward, but also for their peers. I think RNPA is right in the sense that we have to work together, and to your comment, Supervisor, to encourage this type of activity. And it's really coming down to our ability to build trust and direct communication around these issues with our staff.
Right, thanks for that. What is the, I have several more questions. What is the follow-up once a report is made? Obviously, we're collecting the data in whatever cases are appropriate. We're reporting it to OSHA. But what is the feedback loop as far as the reporter is concerned?
If the individual reports the situation, and there's a process for which they report, the expectation is the quality department follows up, but more specifically works with the department manager to ensure that the employee has received the appropriate support that they need. At the time of the incident, the expectation is that the manager, if there's an injury involved, immediately provide support. Also let the employee know what resources are available to them. And that's specific to the employee. What we also try to do is have a debrief given the level of and type of incident that occurs. And that debrief involves staff that were present that and/or responded to the situation to ensure that we understand the entire situation. Typically in healthcare, we call that a root cause analysis. So from a system standpoint, what could have we done differently or better relative to the incident itself? So we learn from the debriefs from a system standpoint. We also are given the opportunity to interact with staff to ensure that that their concerns are being heard and listened to.
And are those debriefs being conducted with regard to every single incident? Are they? I'm looking for a gap between the policy, which sounds like a very good one, and the on-the-ground implementation.
So, and Jill, can you speak to this? But there are two parts to this. So an inpatient unit, depending on the severity or the level of the incident, the manager can institute a briefing and work with leadership and the staff to conduct that debriefing, if you will. Bring EAP in, bring any other support stakeholders, if you will, into the process. In EAP and BAP, the expectation is that they debrief on a regular basis, on a per incident basis, given the level and severities of many of the incidents that are included in BAP and EPS. This was brought up by RNPA in the last meeting, I understand, and that's something that we need to follow up on because it needs to be consistently done in support of our staff.
Thank you. And Jill, can you add?
Sure. So as far as the inpatient, and as Paul mentioned, depending on the severity, we do have an inpatient debriefing team that whether it is an assault or a behavioral verbal assault or maybe a tragic death, we have a team, just of death of a patient or a traumatic code. We have a team that does go and they set up several debriefings to catch all the staff. So that's to deal with the emotional, well-being of the staff. That's usually at the request of the team. But then we also, as Paul said, quality and risk also do a follow-up and work with the manager because they have to investigate what happened. And, I know we've had the sheriff meet with certain individuals that have had concerns with leadership also to help answer questions and what the process is. And I just want to say, I think we all have the same common goals, and I absolutely want a partnership with our NPA and how we can decrease, because none of us want to, our nurses, our doctors, none of us want to see anyone get hurt. I can tell you on a national level, this is a very topic of concern. I'm also still connected to the burn centers across the country, and it is like a major concern, really kind of bubbling up right now with this pandemic, but it was an issue prior to the pandemic. So I know we're all trying to do whatever we can to address this.
Thanks for that, Jill. I have no doubt in my mind that everyone has the same goals. I'm just looking, as we all talk about, continuous improvement and iteration, and that's a theme in my own office, I have to say, of how we can do better the things that we know we want to do. One suggestion I'd like to make is perhaps creating a survey that is used as a follow-up when people report incidents of violence, so that we can hear, did they get what they need? Did they have the debrief? Did they get whatever supports they needed? Were they satisfied with administration's response? And if not, what do we still need to be doing to provide them with the support that they really do need? Last question before I make just a couple of additional requests. Are the protective service officers and acute psychiatric services and hospital and clinic staff all trained together in how to respond to patients that have that may have assaulted staff in the past, or for whatever reason are at high risk for assault? Are those departments trained together?
Well, for psych, we have done some joint training. That hasn't happened in the inpatient setting, so there may absolutely be an opportunity there. But we have done it with the psych services. The trainings were virtual during the pandemic, but I just wanted to note that they have gone back into live person trainings.
That's good to hear, and I'm fully aware that I'm an outsider offering 2 or 3 cents worth of opinions here, but thinking also that communication really is so key to ensuring success and safety, and if the staff and the protective service officers are expected to de-escalate or respond to a patient who is behaving violently together, then I would think that receiving training together and having opportunities to discuss possible scenarios would really help build trust and also avoid communication or any kind of disharmony between the two departments. I do think that there is tremendous potential for real integration and partnerships, and I think about this, certainly not only with regard to our nurses, but with our bargaining partners and departments across the county. I want to just finish with some more general comments about the nurses. It is for sure not a secret that we are facing a national shortage of nurses. That's one of the reasons that Supervisor Chavez and I introduced a referral addressing not only workforce development concerns, but workforce safety concerns. And I'd like to ask that administration consider extra help and per diem nurses for the critical care training program prior to any nurses from outside the county, so that we can help retain our current nurses. And second, I just want to revisit the issue of pandemic pay for part-time workers. we've all discussed that many of our part-time nurses worked full-time during the pandemic. We talked about this issue under the ARPA item at the last board meeting, but the board didn't provide any specific direction. And my goal is to ensure that the nurses and other identically situated county employees receive that full $2,500 pandemic pay bonus. So Dr. Smith, what is the appropriate path, or James, for this board to discuss and potentially direct administration regarding nurses and any other part-time employees that had been asked to and did work full-time hours during COVID?
Dr. Smith and James?
We're scheduled to come back to the board in the second meeting in December to give a report back about the extra help strategy. And that would be a time period where the board could direct us differently or make suggestions. So I would say that's the best time.
Okay, thank you very much. Then I will wait for that and appreciate consideration of the two suggestions that I directed to Paul and Jill. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Chavez.
Thank you. So thank you for the report, and I want to make a few recommendations as well. Sorry, I'm just looking for my notes real quick. I want to be able to make a motion to receive the report with additional direction. And
I second it.
Thank you. And let me just share what that that additional direction is. I want to, Supervisor Ellenberg, I'm going to start both with first with the hiring process and then with the public safety issues. So in December, what I would like to request is that we receive an off-agenda report with the timeline for the engagement of the external firms. The report should respond to the 5-year reserve idea and the original referral that was intended to ensure funds are set aside for to address workplace safety. And second, I'd like to ask staff to report to the board during mid-year with more information on the status of the engagement with the external firms and a thorough analysis of the vacancies within the hospital system, including turnover rates and retention. Third, because nurses' retention is so critical to ensure we continue to offer the highest quality care, and I appreciate the ideas you suggested, I'm therefore requesting the staff share a progress report during mid-year on the development of the retention programs, such as the clinical ladder and critical care programs. Once an external firm has been chosen to support its work, the staff, I want to make sure that the union, RNPA, is included in discussions with ideas so that, to help with recruitment. And then just two other things that I would like to add based on the discussion that I've heard today. One is that we need to address the presence of the public safety officers on site, both how many of them, how available they are, and their training. And then what I would like to ask that gets included is that we have a Harvey Rose audit the actual responses. And the reason for this, but what I mean is the responses to workplace violence, both the reporting and the support services. And the reason for this is that I think part of what needs to be strengthened is the relationship between our staff and our management, particularly with the nurses. And I think having both the external firm and an outside auditor giving just, direct, clear observations will help all of us right size the direction we're going. And then I think the other thing I just wanted to say, and really, Dr. Smith, this is more to you and to Paul than to Jill. And part of the reason that, I think that, Jill, your point about what the trends that are being seen across the country is such a critical acknowledgement that our environment, that there's just a high level of agitation in our environments. And, we're seeing it in grocery stores, we're seeing it in restaurants, we're seeing it, we're seeing it in road rage. It's just, we have to acknowledge that that's part of the environment that we're operating in. And then the second thing I think that's really critical to acknowledge is that when people don't feel well and they have to wait, there's this higher level of agitation. And then when people are waiting with a loved one, you add this other level of tension. And I think that we need to take a deeper dive into, wait times, which is actually part of staffing. And it's also part of, I know something that you're already doing as you're looking at, new ways of procedures and always trying to make things run more smoothly. I recognize that. I just lift that up because I think we're in a new era. And I think absent really being able to address that in our workplaces, we're going to have a different kind of retention problem. And again, something that's being seen all over the country, right? People opting to be out of the workforce instead of in it for those reasons of stress. So, Susan, those would be my recommended additions.
Thank you. Is that fine with the seconder?
It is.
Thank you. I'm just going to echo my support for whatever we can do to retain, recruit, and protect our nurses. That's extremely important to me. I'm proud of the retention rate that we have compared to the national average. Paul, I appreciate your perspective that we can always do better. I think increasing the safety, we can always do better. And recruitment's a tough thing. My daughter's 33, 15 years ago when she was 18, she asked me, Dad, what do you think I should do? And I said, well, 15 years ago, there was a nursing shortage. I said, why don't you become a nurse? She didn't happen to become a nurse, but as far as I know, there's been a nursing shortage for 15 years.
Always.
Nationwide. And the more schools, go Spartans, San Jose State, the more schools that can have classes to train people to get their nursing license, the better. And I hope that increases. I hope the universities recognize the shortage and to have more and more classes, because the patient's experience 90% of the time when they're at a hospital is with the nurse. And that's important. And I'm glad to see all the support that we all seem to have to try and make things better. But every single hospital wants to get more nurses and keep more nurses. So it's a competitive world there. Before I call for a vote, Paul, your hand is up. Did you have one additional comment?
If I may, Supervisor.
Yes.
So one of the things that's, I think, important to understand about the nursing industry and the number of individuals that are entering into nursing is that we have great success in recruiting new nurses. The number of job applications we receive and the number of individual nurses that want to work for your healthcare system is very large. Our challenge, and challenge with most hospitals, is that, as Supervisor Chavez had indicated, many of the experienced nurses, skilled nurses, are leaving the industry, or simply they're retiring and it's their time to move on. What we've acknowledged as a system is that we're large enough to begin to develop and grow our own. We've had conversations with RNPA and with John Mills and ESA about how we continue to develop programs to develop our nurses so that we can move them up to the next level, so they can be intensive care nurses, burn nurses, that they can work in our emergency departments. And so we have to start to change our focus to not only on recruitment, but really developing our own nurses internally within the organization. And that's something that we're focused on, and we'll start to we'll continue to keep your board informed upon our efforts.
Thank you very much. Board members, I'm going to take this vote, and Supervisor Ellenberg, I'm going to need you to take over the meeting. I've got a family matter that I need to step away from the meeting for right now. Nancy, will you please call for the question?
Supervisor Lee?
Aye.
Supervisor Chavez?
Yes.
Supervisor Simidian?
Aye.
Vice President Ellenberg?
Yes.
And President Westerman?
Yes, as well. Thank you. And my apologies to everybody. Vice President Ellenberg, you've got the helm.